Today we will talk about the behavioral economics and real estate bubble. In general, we divide our work to 4 parts: introduction, foundation, real estate bubble, and the conclusion. Okay, firstly, what is the behavioral economics? In a narrow sense, behavioral economics is the combination of psychology and economics that investigates what happens in markets in which some of the agents display human limitations and complications. And next, what does behavioral economics study? To explain this better, we need to know the standard economic model of human behavior includes 3 unrealistic traits: unbodied rationality, unbodied willpower, and unbodied selfishness. In this model, people can always make the most rational choice to get the most benefit for themselves. However, people's choices are not always in accordance with the expectation of the standard model. Herbert-Simon later suggested the term bondi, and the behavioral economics research is about the abnormal behavior, which is called anomalies. So we can say behavioral economics is identifying the way in which behavior differs from the standard model, and showing how this behavior matters in economic context. Here are 3 important figures of behavioral economics: Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, and Richard Thaler. They put forward theories that contributed greatly to behavioral economics as prospect theory and mental acuity. Not only these 2, there are also important theories like heuristic bias and Haldane behavior, and each of them including more detailed contents.
After the introduction of behavioral economics, I will talk about behavioral economics foundation of real estate through 3 important theories. The first one is prospect theory. It introduced the value function into the analytical model and replaced the utility function. It has the properties of reference dependence, diminution sensitivity, and loss aversion. This is a value function curve. Reference dependence refers to the estimation of loss and gain at any time is the relative change of values. Relative changes always have a comparative basis point, which is the reference point, and the decision of the reference point is usually based on the current level of values. Knowing this, we can explain why in the real estate market, with little income increase, people are willing to buy houses that were considered priceless a few years ago. For example, 10 years ago, for ordinary house, people's psychological price is 100,000. If someone bought a house for more than 2,100, it felt too expensive. But now, people's psychological price has reached 400,000. By this time, more than 300,000 houses have become cheaper houses. This psychological price is determined by the repeated stimulation of current price in the market. Then the loss aversion means that loss is more concerned than income, and individuals have the tendency to avoid loss. When dealing with risk, in the face of gain, people show risk aversion attitude, but in the face of loss, they show the risk preference attitude. There is a famous disposition effect due to diminishing sensitivity, and when people face losses, they are already in a completely different mental account, and shows the characteristic of diminishing sensitivity. The second theory I want to introduce is heuristic bias. In the classical decision theory, people will follow B theorem when they want to solve a problem under uncertain conditions. However, in the process of people's usual decision-making, because of the limited information available, that will not follow the B theorem, but adopt another method, which is a heuristic method, which means that people often judge decisions depend on past experience. It can produce a large number of errors, which is called heuristic bias. Heuristic bias is divided into representative heuristic bias, availability heuristic bias, and anchoring effect. Representative heuristic bias means that people simply judge by analogy under uncertain conditions. This often leads to overconfidence. The inertial effect in the real estate market is the result of using representative bias to judge. In the real estate market, if there is a continuous rise in house price, for self-use buyers, he will predict that price will rise further in the future, so his purchase decision is advanced. For inertial investor, he will also buy quickly. There is a self-attribution effect. The feedback mechanism in the real estate market is caused by the cognitive bias. In the rising stage of real estate prices, the feedback mechanism promotes the raising of house prices, and people constantly blow up a bubble caused by themselves. So Ponzi scheme appear. The last theory I want to introduce is Haldane behavior. Eugene Fama put forward the efficient market hypothesis, which holds that in a perfect market, Information about an asset can be quick, completely and accurately obtained and used by rational investors in a timely manner. However, in the real market, it cannot be realized. There are some phenomena that are difficult to explain by the efficient market hypothesis, such as holding behavior. Holding behavior is that people without sufficient confidence of certain problems may refer to behavior of others around them, but others actually hold the same mentality. So, when someone starts to act, all the others will follow, and then the holding behavior will erupt. This explains how individual cognitive errors called social group errors. There was very terrible holding behavior in the 20th century, in America, Japan, and Hong Kong, caused real estate bubbles.
Okay, well, after having a basic understanding of behavioral economics, let me explain in detail the formation mechanism of the real estate bubble. We can divide its total process into bubble germination, bubble formation, bubble expansion, and bubble burst. With the development of the real estate market, there will be some occasionally stimuli that make some people find reasons to buy a house, and the market is gradually activated. At this time, almost all of the buyers are self-use buyers. After some investors profited, investors and speculators began to enter the housing market. And then, the people in the real estate market have been divided into two categories. One is self-use home purchase investors. Their behavior is a consumer behavior, because they buy the house to live. The other one is real investors. Their behavior is investment behavior. They buy the houses to profit from speculation. Speculators has greatly promoted the prosperity of market, and the bubble in the market has begun to sprout. As housing prices rising, speculators will sell housing they hold because of the disposition effect mentioned before. If there are only inertial speculators in a market, and then only the developer is supplying the house, the emergency of disposition effect speculators has increased the supply of the market. Well, this would increase supply and discourage a rapid price rising. On the one hand, the continuous increase in trading volumes and prices makes the market more active. On the other hand, this disposition effect speculators don't leave the market after selling their properties. They will still return to the market, and the vast majority will again become inertial traders, which in turn to strengthen demand and further raises prices. The rising prices have made investors who believe that the market will reverse accept high prices with reference to dependence, and they are beginning to become part of real estate demand. They started to enter the real estate market. We can call them the most conservative self-use home buyer. Their entry indicates that the actual purchasing power has almost been used up, and a certain degree of overdraft has occurred. At this time, the real purchasing power of the real estate market, the demand of buyer for self-use has dropped significantly. The number of people with real purchasing power is decreasing, and the speculators correspondingly occupy most of the market. Most real estate transactions are between the inertial speculator as buyer and the disposal effect speculator as seller. During that time, the real estate market has changed from an investment market with both consumer nature to a speculative market. At this point, the feedback mechanism began to show in the form of a Ponzi scheme. Everyone agrees to follow the crowd and make investment decisions based on this judgment. In fact, everyone is determined based on the behavior of others around. So the so-called herding effect appears. Then the bubble in the real estate market is getting bigger and bigger. When the bubble started to form, there was some real purchasing power. That is the most conservative part of the demanders. But with further expansion of the bubble, house prices are increasingly divorced from its true level. At this time, those who intend to enter the housing market become more cautious due to fear. At this point, many speculators no longer have the ability to speculate, because very high house prices coupled with government regulatory policies, and those in the housing market began to look for all available opportunities with the intention of withdrawing from the housing market as soon as possible. At this time, if there is an accident, it will immediately break all their psychological foundation. It is not an accident fall, but a sign of continued decline, and a bubble begins to burst. Okay, generally in traditional economics, bubbles are actually rational because speculation is a way of investing and rational choice based on rational expectation in the future. In contrast, the judgments and decisions of market micro-subjects are always influenced by their own and certain group's emotional background. The process is to edit the information according to the heuristic principle and make the evaluation according to the prospect theory. Therefore, form is rational on the surface, but essentially it is full of irrationality. In the view of the real estate bubble caused by various irrational behaviors in the real estate market, we propose to regulate real estate transactions and curb excessive speculation through institutional design and policy tools such as tax leverage, so as to effectively prevent and control the excessive growth of the house prices. Thank you for your listening, and there are our references.